sorry guys. I hope you're well, guys. So what will happen is that in this video we're going to be doing that equations inequalities, right? But we haven't gotten to the inequalities part, so we'll be doing equations, right? But to be specific, this chapter it has, I think, 9 units if I'm not mistaken. So I'll be doing in this video I'll be doing completing the square, and then we'll do the quadratic formula, the substitution, and finding the equation and the nature of fruits and everything. We'll do it in the next video if possible, right? So in this video we'll be completing the square, and then we'll be doing the quadratic formula, right? We'll be doing those two. So to start with, you must understand what is completing a square and why should we even complete a square, right? These are just basically two different methods of trying to solve for x, right? We did difference of two squares, whereby let's assume we're given something like x squared plus, let's see, 4x plus 4, right? And then this was 0, right? This, we call it an equation because it has an equal sign. Remember that if it doesn't have an equal sign, we call it an expression, right? So if you were asked to solve for x here, obviously, the first thing to do would be to look for common factors which we don't have, would be to group terms which we can't group them because you need 4 terms or more, right? So the next thing would be to do difference of two squares, right? So how would we do it? We look for the factors of x. We see that the coefficient of x squared here is 1. So we put x and x, right? And this is the second thing you should be doing. The first thing you should be doing is to do what? To check the sign of the last term. It's positive. It's telling us the signs are the same. So what is the same? It's positive. So we put positive and positive. So what are the factors of 4? That when we add them, they will give us 4, right? You can put 2 and 2, you can put 3 and 1, still the same thing, right? Can you put 3 and 1? No, guys, I was just teasing you. The 3 and 1 are not factors of 4 because 3 and 1 don't give you 4, but 3 plus 1 don't give you 4. So those are the mistakes people make, right? So you don't choose the only factors that will give you 4 is 2 and 2, because 4 and 1 would give you 5, not 2. The middle term was 5, would use 4 and 1 as factors, right? So this is how you solve this. And obviously from here, we'd say x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x plus 2 is equal to 0, which would give you x is equal to -2, right? Both of them. Or someone else would say this is the same thing, so simply say x plus 2 squared is equal to 0. Then from there, what they would do, they would put the square root on both sides, and then we know that the square root of 0 is 0, and the square root of this one, we just remove this, we'll be left with x plus 2, right? But remember that this will be plus minus, right? But plus minus 0 doesn't make any difference, so this would be x is equal to -2 either way, right? So here, when we're completing a square, it's just as another method of trying to find this answer, but we won't complete it. We won't be asked to complete the square here because it's already. I'll show you what I'm talking about, right? So always what you must ensure that always what you're given is in its standard form, right? It's in the standard form of a quadratic equation. So the standard form of quadratic equation, it's this one. It's ax squared plus bx plus c, right? It's equal to 0. Why are we always equating it to 0? We call this the zero product rule, right? We call it the zero product law or rule, right? This helps us to find the answer because we know if this is 0, we know that if we were adding this, the only way this could be 0 is if this is -2. So it helps us to reduce and find the correct equations. And always after finding the certain value, you have to go and substitute it to the original equation and see if you get 0. If you don't, then it means there's something that is wrong, right? So the first thing you must always do is to write it in its standard form. This is the standard form, right? Always, when you're given something, let's say in this form, -4x² plus 3. The first thing you do before you can even start solving is to rearrange it and write it in its standard form. You take it with its sign, so it will be negative, and then let's say this was x, then the following thing will be 3x, and then it will be plus 2. You get a mark for writing it in standard form, right? So you must always write it in its standard form. I hope you understand. When I say in its standard form, I mean that the one which has x² has to be the one which starts, followed by the one which has x, and then lastly the one that doesn't have a variable, right? So it's that easy, guys. It's that easy, right? It's that simple. So here I want to show you something. Let's assume that we are asked to solve x² -4 is equal to 0, and then we're asked to solve for x. Obviously someone would see the ways to approach this, it's two ways. Someone would take this and then take the 4 to the other side, and then simply square both sides, and then the answer will be x² is equal to plus minus. Don't forget this plus minus when you remove a square root, and it's only for square root. The answer will be plus minus 2, right? Or someone else would say, okay, my approach would be x, open brackets. I have x and x. I check the sign of the last term, which is negative. It's telling me that the signs are not the same, so they have positive and negative. So I want the factors of 4 that would give me 0, right? So it would be 2 and 2. Why would they give them 0? Because the middle term is 0, right? It's 0, sorry. It's 0. So this 0, we don't write it. So that's why we have x² -4 is equals to 0. It's the same thing, right? So the reason why we are taking plus 2 and -2 is that plus 2 and -2 will cancel each other, giving us 0. Like then 2 and 2 would give us 4. Right? If you multiply this, x and x would give you x², x and this would give you -2x. This one and this one will give you plus 2x. So they are cancelling each other, right? Giving us this 0, right? So, and then positive 2 and -2, when we multiply them, we get -4, right? So someone would approach it in that way, right? They would approach it in that way. And then when they approach it in that manner, obviously, they would have to say x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 2 is equal to 0. So from here to be x is equal to 2, or x is equal to -2, which is the same as this one, right? So you'd have to check for both. Check for the -1 and check also for the positive one if they are both correct, right? I hope that makes sense. So let's assume then we were given something like this, x minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 0, and you were also given something like x² minus 4x minus 4, right? And then you were asked to solve that. So the way you would approach this one, obviously, we don't have common factors, right? We can't group terms, so you would open brackets. So you'd have x and x, and then it's telling you that the signs are the same. What is the same? It's negative, right? So you'd have negative, negative. The factors of 4 that would give you this 4 here. It's 2 and 2, because -2 minus 2 would give you 4. So obviously here it means that the correct one at the end x will be 2. So we can let me know if you find this 2, right? So let's see, if x is 2, 2 squared is 4. 2 squared minus 4 multiplied by 2, that's 8 plus 4. Right, so this 4 and 4 would give you 8. 8 minus 8, that's 0. So it's correct, right? So let's try and solve this one. With this one, obviously you don't have common factors, you can't put 10, so you put different times 3 to difference of 2 squares, right? And then you would have x and x. The signs are not the same, so it's positive and negative. The factors of 4 that would give you the middle term, which is negative 4, we realize that there is not possible because the factors of 4 is 2 and 2 and 4 and 1. So we don't have any that will give us negative 4. We can't say it's this ones because the signs are not the same. The other one should be positive and the other one should be negative. And if that's the case, then we cancel each other, giving us 0. If it's this one, also this one's can't give us that one, right? So they are both incorrect. So now the question is, does this mean that this does not exist? No. It means that it requires a different method in order to solve it. So that is what brings us to this concept of difference of two squares, right? Since we can't find this one using the difference of two squares, then it brings us to the concept of difference of two squares. So how, not difference of two squares, the concept of completing a square. How do you complete a square? Listen to me, you have certain steps, right? So when you complete a square, it's very easy, right? The first thing to do will be to write the equation in its standard form, right? So this equation is in its standard form, right? And then the second thing is to make the coefficient of the x squared, right? The coefficient of the x squared term to be equal to 1, right? So we always want to see the coefficient being 1 here on the x squared, right? By dividing, how can we do what? We divide the entire equation by what we have here. If it's 2, we divide the whole equation by 2. But if it's 1 here, because we have an invisible one, we leave it as it is. Then the third thing to do would be to take half of the coefficient of x and then we square it. And then we add it this side, we subtract it that side. I know it's like I'm talking Greek, let me write it down. The first thing to do, so these are the steps, guys. I've written. Oh, those are the steps, guys. So that is write those steps down. This is what you do always when you complete the square, right? So obviously I'll remove them. You can write them in your textbook or not in your textbook, in your notebook, so that when always when you complete the square, you refer back to this, right? So that summarizes what we'll be doing this side. So the first thing would be to write it in standard form, which is it's already in standard form, right? It's already in standard form. And then always when I say it's in standard form, you must always ensure that the one with squared, it starts here, then followed by x, and always the right hand side is 0. Always the right hand side is 0, then that is in standard form. So the second thing to do would be to ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1, right? You can write that the coefficient of x squared should be 1. So the coefficient of x squared is 1. So done with that one. Then the third thing would be to take half of coefficient of x and square the answer. So when I say take half the coefficient of x, the coefficient, so it would be x squared minus 4x, right? Minus 4x. But what is, I said the coefficient of x, take the coefficient of x. The coefficient of x is 4, right? What is half of 4 is 2. So you square the answer. What is the answer you got is 2, right? So you take half of 4, it's 2. Then you take 2, you square it. So 2 squared is 4. So you would add 4, then minus what is here, and then again minus that 4, not this 4, right? So we added 4, the number that we're adding, you also subtract it, then you equate it to 0. I hope I'm not confusing you. This 4 stays here, right? And then the next thing that you would do would be to take what is here. This trinomial remains this side. This goes to the right hand side. So it's negative 4 minus 4, that would give you negative 8. Negative 8, when it goes to that side, it will be positive 8. We didn't change anything here because this plus 4 minus 4 is 0. So you will be remaining with this minus 4, which will give you the same thing as that one, right? I hope I'm not confusing you guys. And then from there, obviously, this it would mean that we remain with this trinomial this side. So it would mean that we have something like x squared minus 4x plus 4. So it changed from negative to being positive, right? So from here, then you can do that, right? Would I be correct? No. Remember, I told you that always you must ensure that this it goes that always when you do that, that would be on the left hand side, right? So then it will mean you shouldn't be doing that, right? Shouldn't be doing that. I wanted to show you how many people approach it. So you shouldn't do that. You don't add this. You take this as it is, you solve it, right? You write it. I said you add and subtract the answer. So I added 4, I subtracted 4 on the same side. And then you write the left hand side as a difference of 2 squares. So what do I mean? You take this, it will always have the same, so it will be x and x, and then positive, it tells you the signs are the same. What is the same? It's negative and negative. So the factors should always be the same. It should be 2 and 2, right? So you'll be left with minus, this one will be minus 8. So it's equal to 0, right? So this one, since it's the same, we can write it in this form. Now we can take this to that side. So this would be x minus 2 squared is equal to 8. Then what do you do from here? Square root on both sides. So this would be x minus 2 is equal to plus minus root 8, because we don't have what you call, we don't have the square root of 8, right? So this then would mean that this would be x is equal to 2 plus minus root 8, right? You see, now we have found the factors, but when we were trying to solve this using difference of 2 squares, we couldn't. So this is the same as saying x is equal to 2 plus root 8, or x is equal to 2 minus root 8. If you substitute these ones where there is x on the original equation, you find that it's 0. So what we did here is what we call completing a square. I hope that makes sense. So let's try another one. So let's assume you're given x squared minus 10x minus 11 is equal to 0. So you'll be told to solve x by completing the square. If you're not told, you can use the difference of 2 squares, it's fine. But they will tell you, right? So let's assume they tell you to solve for x by completing a square. The first thing to do is to ensure that it's in the standard form, right? And then to ensure that the coefficient of x is 1. So we are done with those first 2 steps. And the third thing would be to write it as it is, but now you take half of the coefficient of x. In this case, it's negative 10. So the half of negative 10 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25. So you can write it for the person who will be marking your paper. You can say plus negative 5 squared so that they see what you did, right? Negative 5 squared. That means it's half of this, right? So you will do that, guys. I won't do it because of time, right? But you have to write it in full. So it will be plus 25. Why 25? Because so it will be plus 25 because half of negative 10 is negative 5. Negative 5 squared is 25, right? So I said you add that 25 and you subtract that 25. And then you take this minus 11, put it here as it is, right? Easy, right? Easy. And then from there, what do? You take this as it is, the first three, right? And then you write them, you factorize. So this will be x and x. It should always be the same. It's plus tells us the signs are the same, right? So what are the factors of 25 that would give us negative 10? It's 5 and 5. They should always be the same because negative 5, when you work this out, it should give you negative. This and this is x squared. This one and that one is negative 5x. This one and that one is negative 5x. Negative 5x and negative 5x will give you negative 10x because they are like terms, right? So from there, what do? You continue this one, negative 11 and minus 25, that is negative 36, right? It's equal to 0. And then from there, you can write this one in this form because it's the same thing. You repeated it twice. So you take that one to that side. And then from there, you do a square root. Why we square root? Because we want to remove that 2. So you have x minus 5 is equal to, what is square root of 36 is 6. But don't forget that plus minus, right? Don't forget that plus. So it would mean then from here, we're going to say x is equal to 5, because this one, when it goes to that side, it will be positive. Plus minus is plus minus 6. So it would mean that x is equal to 5 plus 6, or x is equal to 5 minus 6. So x is negative 1 or x is 11. So you'd have to substitute both on that equation to see if they are correct, right? So I hope that makes sense, guys. I hope that makes sense. So I'll do one more example. Let's assume they give you 2x squared minus 6x minus 10. Then you're asked to solve x by completing a square, right? So the first thing to do to ensure that it's in standard form and to ensure that the coefficient of x is 1. So we can see that the coefficient of x here is not 1, it's 2. So we have to divide by 2 throughout. But you only divide if that number is divisible. Let's assume we had 7 here. It would be unnecessary for us to divide by 2, right? Because 7 is not divisible by 2. But even if you do, it makes no difference, I will show you. So the first thing to do would be to divide the whole thing by 2. So you understand, if we divide 2 by 2, we'll be left with x squared. This one, 6 divided by 2, that will be 3x. And 5 divided by 2, 10 divided by 2 will be 5. And then 0 divided by 2 will be 0, right? So this is now here. And then from here, we complete the square. Because the first step is to ensure that it's in standard form. Second step is to ensure that the coefficient of x squared is 1. So we are sorted, right? So the next thing would be to say this is x squared minus 3x. So now the thing is, we have to find the half of 3 and square it. So you can simply say 3 multiplied by half, which will give you something like 3 over 2, right? Because this is the same as over 1. So we take that 3 over 2, you square it. When you square it, 3 squared is 9, 2 squared is 4. So without using a calculator, the half of 3 squared is 9 over 4. Right, so you add that 9 over 4 and you subtract that 9 over 4. Here you have equal to 0, and then you take this negative if you bring it here, as it is. Right, this thing is not difficult, guys, it's easy. And then you take this 3, you write it in this form. So this will be x, tells you the signs are the same. What is the same? It's negative, so it's negative and negative. What are the factors of 9 over 4? Here they are. It's 3 over 2 and 3 over 2. Right? Easy. Then you take this one as negative 5 minus 9 over 4. You can work it out here. Minus 9 over 4. This is the same as over 1, right? So this is 4. Take the lowest common denominator. 1 into 4, it's 4. 4 multiplied by negative 5, it's negative 20, right? And then this one is 4 into 4 into 1. 1 multiplied by this one, it's negative. So it's negative 29 over 4, right? So this is negative 29 over 4. The only way to master this, guys, is to practice. There's no other way. But if there's something that I explained that you didn't understand, please tell me. I think it's useless for us to go to quadratic formula before I know if you understand this. So I will give you examples of this. So if you understand this, then we'll go to quadratic formula. Right, so these are the same. They can be written in this form. So we take this one to that side. Positive 29 over 4. Right? So from here, what do you do? Square root. Square root. So this will be x is equal to 3 over 2 plus minus root 29 over 4. Because this is not a perfect root, right? So from there, you'd see x is equal to 3 over 2 plus root 29 over 4, or x is equal to 3 over 2 minus root 29 over 4. I hope that makes sense and I'm not confusing you, right? So that will be it for this video, guys, because it's useless to go to completing squares if you don't understand. So the first one that I want you to do for me is this one. X squared, you solve by completing square, yeah? 10x minus 2 is equal to 0. That's the first one I want you to do for me. The second one, it's x squared plus 4x plus 3 is equal to 0. Then the third one, it's p squared minus 5 is equal to negative AP. Then the fourth one is 2 into 6x plus x squared is equal to negative 4. You solve by completing a square, right? And then the other one that I want you to do for me is x squared plus 5x plus 9 is equal to 0. Then the sixth one will be t squared plus dt is equal to 2 multiplied by 10 minus 8t, right? So the other one is 3x squared plus 6x minus 2 is equal to 0, right? And then the last one would be 2x squared is equal to 11x. You can do those 8 for me by completing square, right? So pause the video and write everything down. And write it as I say it so that you don't get confused, because I can see my handwriting is a bit bad, right? So hence I was saying it out loud when I was writing them. So you do all those by completing a square. If you can do those, then you go to quadratic form.